Hi, Russ here. It's UFO Paranormal TV, Flying Saucer Television, and it's a little bit different tonight. It's like talking around the campfire, and we've got Joe though Swanson back on, and we're going to be talking. We've spoken a bit about this before, which is the MK Ultra project. So, hi Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing. Uh, I thought we were talking about Montauk tonight.
Well, yeah. Did I say MK Ultra? Sorry.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's all part of it, but
Part
it's
of. Yeah.
you know,
Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
yeah. Um, Back in the '70s, um, after I was out of the Air Force, a friend of mine gave me a book. Said, "Well, this sounds kind of like what you were talking about." And what he gave me was a book called The Philadelphia Experiment by Charles Berlitz. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so I read that and I thought that was kind of cool. And it was similar, but it wasn't quite the same thing. And so then I got into Edwards Air Force Base Library and from college in Moorhead, Minnesota. And I looked up the Philadelphia experiment is actually called the Project Rainbow. So I looked up Project Rainbow. I looked up the book Philadelphia Experiment. They had an electronic copy there at the time. And I read through that. But what was interesting about their electronic copy is they had in black and white the text of the book. And then in red, yellow, blue, and green, they had commentaries from different other people. And they also had a copy of the Allende letters there. And the Allende letters had the same coloring. And these were different physicists and officers that were talking about the different things that the Philadelphia experiment contained and what was actually happening there and what the physics was behind it. So it
Yeah.
was an interesting read.
Did you say they called it the Rainbow Project?
Project Rainbow, yeah, that's the original name of it.
Why did they call it the Rainbow Project? Do you know?
Well, that goes back to England. One of the guys that they had in there was a fellow by the name of Francis Bitter that they talked about. And he wrote a book called Magnetism, the Education of Physicists. Excuse me. You won't find that original book available on, you'll find a book by him about the same type of topic, but it's not the book that he wrote. No. It's a book that's been heavily edited by the CIA, NSA to take out the important parts. And here's what the important parts are. Remember during World War II, before the U.S. got in and the Nazis were planting magnetic mines in the harbors over in England? Well, what was going on is the U.S. sends Francis Bitter over there
I think the only, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think, I think they only ever got anywhere near the shores once, somewhere on the East Coast.
Well, they were talking about, I know in my history books, they were talking about the Thames being mined. And
right.
They're dragging heavy chains behind the tugboats, wooden tugboats, to get the mines to go boom. And anyway, they wanted to know, what could be done. And Francis' specialty was in magnetism. He was a physicist who specialized in magnetism. And so that's why they brought him over there. And they had advertised in the papers over in England for someone to make the mines invisible or make the ships invisible to the mines.
Yeah.
So it actually started with you guys, the Philadelphia experiment.
Right.
He goes over there, and while he's there, his liaison and he go to check out a magician, a stage magician who had answered an ad in the one of the papers there.
Yeah.
If they knew how to make a ship invisible, and so they go to the stage show. The magician does his stage show, and he makes a rabbit disappear. And he makes a girl disappear on stage. You know, typical
Yeah.
stage magic. And when the show's over, they say, "Well, okay." And so he's got a pedestal, and on this pedestal is an aquarium, and in this aquarium is a little ship. And he goes to the wall, throws a switch, and the ship disappears. He turns the switch off, and the ship reappears. And so they say, "Is that how you made the rabbit and the girl disappear?" And he said, "No, that energy field is hazardous to organic living material."
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they take this back to the U.S. You know, radar was a big thing, and they wanted to make ships invisible to radar and ships invisible to this and that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called Project Rainbow, because it was, you know, using spectrum to analysis. So they talked to Tesla at the time. And Tesla looks at it and he says, "No, it's going to be hard on people. I don't want anything to do with it." So they give it to Einstein. And Einstein comes up with the math for it. And then they give it to the calculators to do all the calculation on it. At that time, a calculator was a person who worked with a calculator machine. And so they'd have rooms full of these people with calculator machines doing little bits and pieces of the problem to be reassembled later. But anyway, they did that, and they came up with what we now call the Philadelphia experiment. Well, the Philadelphia experiment caused the Earth system to resonate every 20 years. So in 1943, when they ran it, August 12th through the 14th time frame, it made the, but the ship actually it put it into like a hyperspace mode, and it travels 600 nautical miles in 10 minutes from one harbor to another harbor. And they had problems because people ended up in the deck and the bulkheads and stuff like that, because they didn't shield the ship didn't shield the personnel from the field.
No.
And so, you know, they lost a few people that way. There were also reports of some of the personnel had to wear frequency generators around the waist to like a belt.
Yeah.
To keep them in this reality that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And if the batteries went dead, they're up on one of the top floors of the VA hospital, wherever it was. I don't remember. And they get a strange look on their face, and they just walk out through the wall and disappear. They walked out to a different reality is what they did. So that happened, you know, in 1943. So in 63, when they ran the project again, they're going to try to see if they could go back in time, you know, because they went outside of time, you know, for 600 nautical miles in 10 minutes. It just doesn't happen. And that's dock to dock, you know, all the lines laid and everything. And so where was I? I forgot where I was. I'm sorry. I'm getting old. Anyway, 63, they they tried it again, and they tried to put people back in time. In other words, send
Yeah.
children back through time, and they to see if they could change anything. Well, they sent one kid back through time to Gettysburg speech, Lincoln's Gettysburg speech at
Yeah.
and they actually see the kid in the picture because there were pictures taken. They see him, so they know he was there, and they brought him back, and he was there, but he couldn't change anything.
No.
Um, and so they also started working with psychotropic drugs in order to improve psychic abilities in people. So your LSD and that type of stuff. And then excuse me, I have to order my thoughts a little bit. Then in 83, I had been in training for something called the Gateway Experience from the time I got out of the Air Force until 1982. And what this is it started out in the Air Force where they gave me a dose of peyote and LSD. And that's so that you can expand your concept of reality.
Yeah.
And so they did that. And then they were going to give me treatment. And they ended up doing what they called relaxation therapy, which was actually using the Monroe tapes to see if I could do psychic events. And then after Monroe tapes, they had me put galvanic skin response sensors on these two fingers of each hand. And then I had to play Pong with myself. And that was to see if I could separate the hemispheres of my brain. And, so you could be watching the Pong and one hand would control the other hand, but you had to be perfectly still while you were doing it. You couldn't be moving your fingers.
No.
So it was just using thought to control the paddles. That was back in the mid 70s, early 70s. And then, of course, they did other training on that, and they kept tabs on me. Military intelligence monitored me from 72 until 82. And then I was handed off to the NSA after a double blind meeting. Anyway, so in 83, I had been selected to be a remote viewer for the Montauk Project. I was still living up in Moorhead, Minnesota, and they had me drive down to the VA in Minneapolis. And there was an old third-story WPA building, World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had me up on the third floor of this room, and the room was staged. What I mean by that is when you go on a stage, you have marks on the floor, tape marks usually, as to where things are supposed to be set, so the actors don't bump into things, because they block out all where they can walk and how they can walk and stuff like that. And so there are tape marks where the desk was to be set. So under the legs of the desk were tape marks. Where the big overstuffed chair, like I have right now, was to be set. And there were tape marks for those. There was a tape mark up on the wall where a picture was hung for me to look at. And there was a tape rectangle on the desk where the cassette recorder could be placed for the hypnotherapy thing. And there was a square on the floor where the control person could monitor or could be without being in the radar beams.
Yeah.
Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport was shut down for the 1 hour of my session with her every time I went.
Wow.
It shut down a huge airport because they were using the radar from the airport, which was a SAGE radar, so it would jump. Today we call them weather radars,
Yeah.
and they allow us to see the weather, and they jump up and down.
Yeah.
And they don't want them to get close to the ground because when they're doing that, it could activate the psychic abilities of people.
Wow.
And so that's kind of
Wow. That's incredible, is that?
how the session. And typically the people that go through that end
Yeah.
up having their brains fried
Yeah.
because of the radiation from the microwave radiation from the radar beam. Well, I had a bad headache the first day I went, and I'm going, Jesus, just like someone was shooting a radar beam at me from a cop car, on remote portable radar. And it took a couple hours. It took the whole drive home, which was about 3.5 hours,
Yeah.
to go 250 miles. And I got home and took a few aspirin, and went to bed, kind of wrote it off. And so on the next visit I was in there, I threw myself into the chair to knock the chair off its marks, and then lean out over the side of the chair. And because I didn't like the radar beam hitting me.
No.
And they went through the sessions, and each session after that, I'd throw it one way or the other, but it would be all out of focus from what they wanted.
Wow.
And anyway, so where most of the people who did this with the radar beam and stuff, they're dead. I'm still alive. But yeah, they had me under hypnosis doing this, reporting to them as to what was going on, what I was monitoring.
Yeah.
And then if I were at home and sleeping and they turned the damn things on, I'd feel it again and take in monitoring that. The first little bit of the experiment, May, June area, it was, we were looking for a timeline where someone by the name of George Bush would be King of the United States or Emperor of North America. And I didn't realize it at the time, but at the time, George Bush Sr. was head of the CIA.
Right.
So that tells you where the project's coming from.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I don't like the concept of king or emperor type of thing. I prefer democracy. And so I didn't give them the answer they looked at. We looked at about 1,000 different timelines. And so, people say, well, you got to know what the future is. I'm going, your idea is as good as mine. I've seen thousands of them. Which one we're on, I can't tell you. Maybe it's 165 B25, because that's kind of how they coded them. And
so what you're saying is basically, he could have been the king of US and Canada.
Yeah.
In a different timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they actually ran the project, and by the time they ran the project, I decided to look at the base because I knew that the gal was from Montauk Island, and because I flew her in every time for my session, and I was her only patient.
And who was that, did you say?
Huh?
Or did you say they flew in?
I didn't understand. What was that?
Did you say they flew somebody in?
Yeah, the therapist gal,
Right,
air
I
quotes.
see. Yeah.
She was actually probably one of the Muntop kids,
Right.
and they flew her in. My first interview for the project to see whether I'd be accepted to the project or not. A fellow that looked like Al Balick was the person who interviewed me. Yeah, and he had a file that would choke a horse. I mean, I don't think I could write that much paper. It was at least this thick. And I overheard him from the hallway. He had me wait out in the hallway. Yeah, he'll do. He works best. He responds best with women. So we'll have to have a woman come out to do this. So, I had overheard that in the hallway. And I was kind of like, what the hell are they talking about? It's supposed to be relaxation therapy is all. New type of relaxation therapy.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how that went. And, I had sessions. I had a lot of night chairs come back that I had previously thought I had gotten rid of. And I had to work through them all again. And at the end of the project, the last time I was there, I thought, maybe I should take control of this because I've been doing lucid dreaming and stuff like that. I'll just take control of it. I want to see what's going on out there. So I remotely viewed the base and all kinds of underground stuff that they had there. And I saw a reptilian down there. And I thought, oh, God, there's a reptilian here. How do I kill it? And the only thing I could come up with was, it's like a maze or a labyrinth down here, maybe a minotaur. And so, what kind of minotaur? An energy beast minotaur. And so I released that base.
Right.
In 2003, they ran the equipment again. And they actually did change the timeline. They had a fascist in the chair, like a neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to take people out of our timeline and put them into the other timeline to bend the timelines over,
yeah,
they were just killing off people to make the timeline change. So,
well, why would they do that? Sort of like.
Well, they were looking for a fascist United States, a fascist North America, or a fascist world. We haven't seen a rise in fascism, have we?
No. Not that you notice. I mean,
we have here in the United States.
Well, it'd be a very funny kind of fascist United States because everything that's happened over there and over here doesn't look fascist to me whatsoever.
Oh, it does to me.
I mean, you've got more rights. Everybody's got rights, and that's totally against what the fascist belief is. So how can you possibly say that, sort of like there's a fascist movement, taking place in America?
It just is. Our Republican Party. Our Republican Party has given the reins over to the neo-Nazis, the KKK, and the Christian right.
Well, it don't look like it from from where the most people in the UK are looking, sort of like what we're seeing. is sort of like the total opposite, same as in this country.
Yeah. Well, similar. I mean, we have a friend up in Canada that keeps talking to me and calling to me because she listens to conservative radio programs, and then it doesn't match what's going on. So she wonders what's going on. So I tell her what's going on.
But it doesn't. That's just it. Nothing, about any fascist movements around. Sort of like would sort of like look to me and anybody else as sort of like what you would call in the UK as rubbish. You think, well, that's rubbish. You know what I mean? It's the total opposite.
Oh, they've been holding the neo-Nazis actually held a crystal night type of activity hereafter.
You always get these groups. You always get right-wing groups holding sort of parties, and you get the left doing the same and the middle.
I don't mind them holding parties. I just mind it when they start killing people and damaging things.
You don't have to be a Nazi to kill people. You've only got to look at America.
Yeah.
And Canada and my country. So does that mean everybody that's killing people are Nazis?
No, not everyone.
Look at the word what
not
Nazi
everyone
means, because that ain't what's happening over here.
Yeah.
In the UK, and if you look in Canada and America even, sort of like it doesn't ring true. It's sort of like, it doesn't ring true.
Okay. Anyway, so in 2003, when they did this, I was driving on the right-hand side of the road, and all of a sudden I had the black lines go through as we were changing timelines, and I was on the left-hand side of the road. On the right-hand side of the road, there was so much heavy traffic, I couldn't move to the left if I wanted to. The left is the high-speed lanes, and here in the States. And when after the lines went through and I was in the left-hand lane, there was no traffic around me. So I said, okay, they're playing with it again, and I don't want to put up with it. I got a couple other people who could do things psychically together with me. And we located the chair. This time it was being run in New Jersey. They moved it from New York to New Jersey. And we traced the power. We had done little things to try and give them setbacks. And we finally just traced the power from where they were all the way back to the dam that provided it. And we traced out all the circuit breakers along those lines. I had one fellow rewire the circuits psychically, and another fellow drew a little bit more energy and gave me a little more energy, and then I did a push through the circuits. And they had a big power flow that flowed backward through the circuits, which is not supposed to happen. And this is in 2003. And the northeast coast of the United States went dark. And you can read about that in the newspapers.
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah. And that's because we needed them to shut down the equipment, so it wouldn't go fully fascist. And
go fully what? Sorry,
fully fascist.
In what respect?
They were looking for a Nazi-controlled world.
Right. So who stopped it?
The ending of the killing of the power to the chair.
But so we've got this massive power in the United States they're presumably wanting this to happen, right?
Yeah.
And
They have
they have got somebody that can stop it and stop them from, if you want to call it, supreme power of the world.
basically that's what they're
And
going for. Yeah.
they've got somebody that can just flick a switch. Don't ring true. You know what I mean? How could,
Well,
I mean, sort of like that person flicking a switch, in my mind, if it were this dark secret, sort of like Nazi organization that were trying to win during Second World War, would have fried them along with the chair.
well,
You know what I mean?
you have to know where the switch is. They know who did it
Yeah,
now.
but I mean, if it's their technology, when all's said and done,
Well,
are they going to have somebody just going to come and flick a switch? Because let's put it this way:
it's not.
whoever allowed that to happen, I should imagine they'd be in some kind of chair, fried.
Well, the person
And
was
the
in the
person that
chair.
flicked the switch, I suppose, would be in more than one dimension. You know what I mean?
We were changing. They're trying to change timelines, and I got tired of the timelines changing because it's.
Yeah, but if they're this supreme power, and you've done that, how comes that they didn't fry you?
They've tried.
Yeah, but trying isn't doing, is it?
Well, they after '83, I was used as target practice by the 86th Airborne when they trained them to do it. And I usually do a desist or die. It was with the 86th Airborne that I realized that how they're doing it, because they have a control person there with the person who's doing the reading, doing the remote viewing, and they have someone else that's monitoring the equipment, the EKG equipment and stuff, and they also had them in a oh God, what is it called? A rig to tell if you're lying. And what they then they monitored that.
Yeah.
And that's how they're doing things. And I first attacked, after the sister died, I attacked the person who was doing the remote viewing, and then I realized that person didn't really have anything to do with it, because they were just doing what they're told, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know what they're told. And then I looked to the control person, because they were telling them what to do. I looked at the person in the who had all the equipment they're monitoring. And with the electrical equipment, one of the things I learned when I was in the 70s going through the training, I was a field service engineer, and I covered 6 states and 3 provinces repairing computers. And I had a computer in Dickinson, North Dakota. And I had another one in Bismarck, one in Minot. And I would think about, as I was driving the drive, because it's like 200, 300, and 260 miles for the trips from Fargo Moorhead. And I'd think about the computer circuits and go through the circuits in my head and think about which logic chip was not functioning properly and what had to be done in order to get it to work properly. And I'd note the time as I was driving. And they said, well, if we had a cell phone, we would have called you, or we had a phone, that could have gotten a hold of you, we would have called you, because at such and such time it started working again. And it just drove me nuts because I'd drive all that distance. I'd have to stay overnight and check, verify the computers were still working and stuff like that, and see if there's anything I could fix, and then go home again.
Wow.
So I figured if you can fix it, you can break it. And then when I got my Reiki degrees, Reiki is a hands-on healing type of thing. That was mainly, oh, it's broken. Let's fix it. So you can put stuff together. It's on a subatomic level basically, and you have to think totally differently from what people are used to thinking. The universe is something totally different than we believe. It's our reality as we perceive it is a consensus of minds. In other words, you and I agree that this is what reality is. But it's not all the reality because our senses don't span the whole spectrum. So.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So, we live in a holographic multiverse, basically, is the best way to put it. And eventually, I'm sure the physicists will get back around to the eighth theory of being in this sea of energy. And on that sea of energy, everything is kind of written in the foam of the sea of energy is everything we perceive as reality.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because somebody had wrote something down the other day, and it was something about physics or something, and they said that when you've looked at physics and something physics, and then you realize just how much you don't know, because when you've learned everything, what you've learned, it doesn't make sense because it's like something to do with when you look at maths and you think, oh yeah, when you write an equation down and you can do it so many times, when you've done it say like a million times, it changes and it doesn't work the same. How does that, how can that possibly not work?
Yeah,
it's because
if it's worked 1,000 times, why doesn't it work the one time?
Yeah, it's like what it means is you can say one add one add one, 100 times 100, 1,000 times is 1,000. But when you do it so many times, millions of times, that it goes from that to something else. Like it don't work, and how comes it won't work? And this is what this equation or something what they've been doing. They realized that so that meant that everything that you can get to a certain point, and then it's like it doesn't necessarily mean that beyond that it's different. Well, how can it be different? And what they're saying is it can.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with most physics, it's theory. So there's room for error in there.
Yeah.
And then when you find an error, you try and figure out why there is an error there. And you come up with another theory.
Yeah.
So they started out with the theory of aether. In other words, just energy that permeates everything. And then they went from that to relativity and quantum mechanics. And I think they'll eventually, with the Large Hadron Super Collider, realize that there's a sea of energy under all of it. And then we're back to the start again. A fellow by the name of T. Henry Moray wrote a book called The Sea of Energy in which the Earth Floats. And what he did is he tapped this energy. And he tapped it with a special gas-filled vacuum tube.
Right.
And he could draw 50 kilowatts of power out of this little tube that was about the size of $2 silver stacked on top of each other.
Wow.
And he was directly converting the mass in the tube to energy. And he found that it fluctuated, but he couldn't figure out why it fluctuated. And so it wasn't a set frequency. The frequency would shift up and down.
Yeah.
And Thomas Townshend Brown, and he had his notes suggested it shifted. The shift was happening because of sidereal time. I haven't quite figured out what all sidereal time is, although I think it's supposed to be some sort of time based outside of the Earth. But he said, Brown said that it shifted. The frequencies that things would work at shifted based on sidereal time. So that's part of the whole thing here.
Yeah.
And recently, there's a physicist up in New York that came out with a book called Super Relativity.
Mm.
And what that is working with is he's working with the concept that our subatomic particles that form our mass and stuff,
Yeah,
are actually extensions out of another dimensional thing. And so, while we think they're one thing, we're just seeing part of what we see as subatomic particles is actually part of what the actual particle is.
So, right. So 2003.
Yep.
And then we go on to when they tried this neo-Nazi tried to basically take over.
Yep.
So are they still trying to take over?
Well, this is 2023. And remember, it's a 20-year cycle.
Yeah. So obviously,
I don't know what's going to happen this time around.
Right. Well, yeah.
Okay.
I suppose, in a way, what happened in 20 is a precursor to this year.
Yeah.
Because no matter what anybody says, if you're watching TV now of what happened in my country, where we were told we couldn't go out, we had to wear masks in this bubble. You know, you could only have 6 people round, and you had to still wear masks in this bubble. And we've got the people telling you that, laughing and dancing and singing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Having parties when you're told you can't party, you can't go to a pub, you can't go in a pub and drink. You know what I mean? Even if you're wearing a mask, you can't go out. You know what I mean? You can only go out if you need to go to the hospital, doctors or dentists, if you can find them, that is. And all the time, these people that were telling you how dangerous it was, are actually laughing and partying,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and getting knighthoods, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So now people are saying we've been hoodwinked, right? Yeah, we
Yeah.
all knew when they said there were a pandemic, right? Yeah, and you're seeing what was going on. I were talking about airplanes flying and landing, and where they'd come from, the passengers, and I was told no by the BBC. I'm saying, well, look, I'm looking. I can tell you because I've got this app, right? Yeah, and I can tell you what aeroplane has taken off from what
Yep.
country, where it's landed, how many passengers have taken off, how many's landed, and where they've landed at. And I says, and oh no, those aeroplanes are cargo planes. I said, no, they're not. I said, I'm telling you, listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying to you, right? Yeah, I'm talking about passenger planes that are landing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, from these crap holes where this epidemic supposed to be pandemic supposed to have come from, landing in a country where we can't go out, but yet the people are landing and driving around. How does that make any sense? Oh no, you're not. I said, I'm not wrong, I'm not mistaken. I can tell you the aircraft that have got passengers and that are carrying cargo, the cargo and the passengers. I can tell you the mix. I can tell you, you know what I mean? And it was from that point of view, looking at this information, what we've got at us fingertips, what they have, that it was a sham.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now we're learning today that, you know, people were told they couldn't go and they couldn't go to funerals, they couldn't see the loved ones in hospital. And we know now exactly what's happened. But still, you know, I remember seeing the ones that used to
So someone
shout
is
the
trying to.
most with the flag and say, never let what happened, you know, in Germany to the Jews happen again, you know, waving this little flag around.
Yeah.
But yet those very same people were the first to go get injections, were the first to wear the masks. They were
Yeah.
first to say, oh, don't come near me, don't come near me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we, you know, and ludicrous, ludicrous.
Yeah. I got
So
COVID.
anything could happen.
Yeah, I got COVID in 2019 in December.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you didn't get it. How did you get it?
It traced back to I
I'll
got it
tell
from a
you
little.
now.
I got
You
it
got
from a
it
little
because
kid.
somebody had a COVID injection,
I
right?
got
Yeah,
it from
that
this
that
was
give
no
out.
injection. This was no injection. I
No,
got it from a
somebody
little
they were having
girl.
an injection, and that injection, what it does, it's like any injection, like a flu injection. When you have one, it seeps out flu. Any of these, you get any of these injections that are supposed to stop you from getting any of the, you know, flu virus or whatever, right? Yeah, it seeps out and it gives you the flu. It gives people around you the flu. So if anybody had had an injection for COVID, right? Yeah, it's been passed on. That's how it was passed on. It wasn't passed on originally because it was there. They passed it on through the injections, just like they did in Africa to all those millions of children through the vaccines and what have you. So the thing is, we, you know, people wake up, you know.
Yeah, it's. I got it without any injections. There was a little girl
A
who
lot of
had it.
people did. This is what I'm
She
saying. You
got it.
won't,
She got it from her grandparents that were in Wuhan, China. This was before it was a pandemic.
say again.
So I know exactly the steps that it took to get to me. And I had a
But
compromise.
nobody knows exactly. No, it's impossible to say exactly. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, nobody's admitting for one thing where it came from. The very people that told where it were coming from, like, if you believe that, do you believe what Trump said then? Do you believe what Trump said, that it was made in, what do you call it, Wuhan in China?
Wuhan.
Do you believe that?
Wuhan was the level 5
Yeah, but do
bioweapon.
you believe in it? Do you believe that that's what it was passed on through
Well,
that?
I know from my reading before that was originally developed by a Japanese doctor, experimented with American prisoners of war during World War II.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've also seen about the other link, the big computer whiz who had been got his
Yeah,
hands on it and were over in China because they can make it cheaper over in China.
In 1963, that doctor from the Japanese doctor, he had defected to China,
Yeah,
and set up the Wuhan lab. And in 1963, when he died, his assistant from Wuhan, China, defected to the U.S.
and who did he work for?
He went to work for the military intelligence complex.
Yeah.
And that same type of technique is what they use. They were using during World War II. They're using the chickenpox virus, and they were loading it with other things instead of chickenpox, and seeing what the results were. And they're trying to get people to have autoimmune diseases. And in '63, when he defected, it was research on autoimmune diseases that they brought over. It was written up in Popular Mechanics magazine. They had a special on military type things.
Yeah.
And it was in there. And I thought that was kind of weird. And the U.S. gave the research to the Allies from World War II so that they could experiment on their own population also.
Oh yeah, in history, I mean, they've used these vaccines and viruses on their own people. In many countries have done this. This is a big problem.
Oh yeah.
Subways, they've let stuff off in subways, aren't they?
So anyway, yeah. But I directly traced my episode to Wuhan, China, and it was just 2 hops. The little gal's grandparents were over there, and they
sorry,
got.
I didn't get what you said then. Whose grandparents? Sorry.
I got it from a little girl,
Right.
and she had flown into Winnipeg for a party for another little girl.
Right.
And huh? Little boy. Little boy. I'm sorry, little boy. And she had flown in from Vancouver, British Columbia, and her grandparents had babysat her for 2 weeks before. They made the trip, and when they made the trip, her grandparents went into the hospital with the COVID-19, and so this was the first part of December.
You see, the very thing when the word pandemic was mentioned, right? Yeah. Why wasn't borders closed down? Because if you read pandemic, you see you close borders, don't you? You make sure nobody comes in, nobody goes out. So the
Yeah.
thing is, you know, there's a lot of people in government have got a lot to answer for, because basically, if you don't do that, you're the cause of people dying.
Yeah.
You can't call it a pandemic and just leave the borders open. You know what I mean? Think about it. You know, I'm not educated.
I understand. I understand.
Obviously, people in the government don't understand.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. But
So,
then
you
I'm
know,
one of
what
those
you're
who
looking
believes
at
that
is an
I believe in
organization.
a secret government. You know,
Well,
everything's
yeah. This is it. This is a big problem,
yeah,
because just who runs the country?
yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
I look at the people in my country, right? Yeah,
uh-huh.
and I wouldn't set them on if I had a burger joint. I would not enjoy. I would not. Sorry, I I would not employ any of those I've seen sat round that parliament. I wouldn't employ any of them. Seriously,
I understand.
I
Like
would not employ any of them.
they aren't working for us; they're working for the people that
Left, right, or middle.
have the big cash. You know,
That's all it's about. Yeah, that's all it's about. Make millions and get out while you can.
and you know, if you can control people with pandemics or whatever,
Well, I
yeah,
think
find
they
a
were
way to make.
beginning to realise they were losing. They were losing the battle, because what you didn't realise was that there was people being told not to go out, and there were people going out, and there were people getting really annoyed. And I'll tell you now, you know, sort of like, I know for certain, I know for shadow of a doubt, that we are not watching, right? Yeah, what you would think is, you know, the talk about sort of like Korea and China stopping people from seeing what is really going on, and stopping people from having the real news. I look and I cannot see any news on my television in this country. It's what you call pap or poo, and it's all the same. And you know, sort of like, you know, it's always the same old news. It's to keep people
Here in the
happy.
U.S. Here in the U.S., we don't get much information on anything that's going on
No, we
anywhere else
don't.
in the world.
We don't. The only people that my friend, he says he watches some Asian network, an Indian network, and a Russian network to get the news about what's going on in this country
Yeah.
and America. So, you know, sort of like, you've got to ask yourself, wow, why? How come? Something not quite right.
Well, like they say, the media is in with the government now. They're under control.
I think it always has been.
Oh, they have.
It has been for a long time. I think it
Yeah.
has been for a long number of years. I'll be honest
Well,
with you.
they discovered what kind of power the media had back in the days of Hertz publishing.
But you see, the government buy the companies, and people in government put their money, you know, into companies and buy companies.
Yeah,
So by
I see
doing
I
that,
see what you're saying.
you might have,
To me, the companies are buying the government
or the
because
government are buying the companies
over here in the U.S.,
as well.
uh, the companies give big money donations to
Of course, they do over here. They
representatives.
have done for years,
Yeah,
and it's got to be stopped. You should not need money to back you if your idea, right? Yeah, if your idea of whatever party it is and your principles, right? Yeah, are good, and
Yeah.
for the people, not for you.
For the people.
If you've got a vocation to help your people, your country, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
that's all you need, right? Yeah,
It should
but
be.
unfortunately, it hasn't worked like that for over in this country for about 50 years.
Yeah.
I
It
think
was it,
the
it
last
was it was
party.
about the time that Eisenhower, toward the end of the Eisenhower administration, the military industrial complex, and the actual name of it when the bill came up was the Congressional Military Industrial Complex.
Yeah,
But Congress had their name removed from it so that they could hide their input into it.
involvement.
Yeah. And Eisenhower signed the bill under duress, but he filmed himself signing it. He said, "I'm signing this." And he said, "And God have mercy on us."
No,
Because
yeah,
he knew
I've heard this, but the problem is, right? Yeah,
he still
if we
signed.
go
He
back to
signed it under
Eisenhower,
pressure.
didn't Eisenhower sign this so-called agreement with an alien race?
Yes, he did.
So how can he say that, right? Yeah, about signing, sort of
The
like
alien
being
race
part of this government,
wanted them to
military,
stop
and
producing.
company.
The alien
But
race
yeah,
wanted.
it don't make any sense because if by all means, sort of like sign something for the benefit of your people and what have you. But from what I'm picking up on is that there was nothing really what you would call good about what he did, because to allow people to be abducted, a certain quarter of people, right, yeah, to be taken each year in
Okay, I
return
don't
for
think that I don't
technology.
think that's the one that he signed. I think the one that he signed was that they would help us from a technological standpoint if we reduced production of nuclear weapons. And so during the Eisenhower administration, we reduced production of the weapons.
Well, what about the one where he was supposed to have agreed to give humans, right, yeah, to aliens?
I think that was first done in Nazi Germany.
No, it was Eisenhower. It was supposed to have given the go ahead for aliens
I,
to be able to take so many a quarter of a quarter of people to be abducted each year.
I had read that the Germans during World War II signed for 1,000 Germans to be taken uh, over a year and returned.
And what year would
And
that have been?
that would have been about 1939 or 1940. Uh,
Because there were an incident in 36, which
36,
I
maybe it was 36.
it,
They're trying to
there were a
build.
crash, wasn't there? Remember, there were a crash in one of the German cities there.
Oh, they did have. I
Black
did hear
Forest, was it
that.
somewhere near Black Forest?
Well,
And
the Black Forest, I can understand. Black Forest is related to Victor Schauenberger, and Victor Schauenberger designed a UFO.
yeah,
And you can.
but there was supposed to have been aliens taken away, and
Yeah,
and again, this Vril Society,
yeah.
was this one of the reasons why they came to the front because they one of them, if I remember rightly, there were a Templar and there were 3 women that were supposed to have communicated with these aliens.
Uh-huh.
So again, we're talking about aliens and communication, interaction with the Germans just before, you know, the Second World War,
Yeah.
which always made me wonder: was that sort of like is that what started it? You know,
You know, if you got a war going on, it's real easy to disappear people.
of course, yeah,
I mean, like for me, the cover story when I was in the service was that when I was supposed to be going to L5, the cover story was that I was missing in action in Vietnam.
right,
And I got home, I got married, came back from my honeymoon, and my mom had the letter saying I was MIA in Vietnam,
yeah.
you know.
So
And
if anybody's watching this, um, if you can let us know, um, you know, sort of like with the president Eisenhower, you know, can anybody come on a comment? And am I right in thinking that yeah, he did sort of sign it, not sort of, but did sign this agreement about well, basically in exchange for technology and for aliens to be able
yeah,
to abduct and take people.
I
If
don't know
anybody's
whether
out there
you
tonight,
see, I don't remember anything about the abduction thing with Eisenhower, but I do know that they wanted him to stop with the nuclear weapons, and so
but
they,
why? I mean, I can't understand why would they want that anyway.
if you've got a sea of energy and you have multiverses
Mm,
in that holographic multiverse type situation, and all of a sudden you have a big spike in energy like a nuclear bomb,
yeah,
that's affecting across
everything. Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And
It's
so
like a ripple effect.
that's affecting them as well as us.
Yeah,
And so, you know, let's back off on some of the testing and stuff. And let us know ahead of time so that you don't screw us up when we're doing something else.
yeah. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
You know.
It could be true. That could be true.
And so and what the technology that they were getting was the L5 base. It was
Right.
a 2,500-foot long vehicle I helped build. And we built an 8,000-foot long vehicle. And those
Yeah.
are minor. Those are minor in size compared to what they were building.
I think
And
what was it called again?
what?
The craft that what you're saying that they built.
I don't know what name they had on it, but
I
it
saw a
was,
program where this country had built something called is it Atoll, and it were a massive spacecraft, and it threw out atomic bombs at the back, and there was this thing like a spring, and when the atomic bombs went off, it shoved this spring in, and it projected it. Have you ever seen that? I
yeah,
think they're called Atoll.
that's one of the plans that NASA had
I think England had
back
made
during
that
the
in
von
the
Braun era.
50s.
You know, NASA had a plan like that to use nuclear fusion to nuclear bombs
Yeah.
to propel the vehicle through space.
It's like in England we had a zone equivalent to NASA.
Yeah,
We had a zone equivalent
almost
to
there.
space program.
Yeah,
You know, to what like NASA on the west coast of Scotland. And basically, one of the things agreement was that it had to be closed down in with the Americans in the 50s.
oh, okay.
if I remember rightly. Amazing, quite amazing. What the had built up there
Oh yeah.
on the northwest coast.
Well, NASA has had a tight link to the CIA, and I don't know if you remember Project Paperclip under World War II.
Well, of course, yeah.
Okay, they brought in all these Nazi scientists
yeah,
and spies. The spies went into the CIA. The Nazi spies went into the CIA, and the scientists went into NASA.
Yeah. A lot of them came from Peenemünde.
Yeah,
from the rocket facility.
Yeah,
there.
And Victor Schauenberger
Oh yeah,
was brought over to the U.S. and he was pissed because the Kumunde scientists would not allow him to talk about flying saucers. So he went home in disgust because he knew that there were a better way to get into space than to use rockets.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
And so, I mean,
do you know there was an incident before Roswell?
Yeah.
Where a craft landed, and it was the last days, or even the last day of the war.
Okay.
And a craft landed in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
And it was supposed to have, they're not sure, but they think it was an exotic craft, and they wasn't sure whether there was trying to abduct Winston Churchill. Do you know about
really?
this?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting story.
Yeah, they weren't sure whether but it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I've got all the paperwork on it. It's quite amazing.
That sounds like it.
And there's a speculation that there may have been extraterrestrial involvement as well.
Well, well, when World War II ended.
Yeah.
You remember the Falklands War?
Oh yeah.
That was the end of World War II.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. Oops.
I mean,
after
the
who said that it was a case of there was trying to get their hands on Hitler.
Yeah.
But why would they bother? I mean, the thing is, with Operation Paperclip, right? Yeah, you've got America that pretty much ruled and told England, do this, do that, do the other, right? Yeah. You know, sort of like what, shut this facility down on the west coast of Scotland, the equivalent to NASA. Let Icelandic fishing boats fish in your water, right? Yeah. My own navy turned its gunboats not on the Icelandic gunboats, but our fishermen, right? Yeah, because America had told them, right? Yeah, do not attack those boats.
Oh, really?
Right, yeah. Pardon?
Really?
Oh yeah. And it were all to do. I think, with a line that run up in Iceland, and it was this cable, and they were watching the Russians, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
that would make sense.
So we're being told what to do, sort of like allies, but like do this. Now, why, sort of like, why would they go to war? Why would they let England go to war with Argentina again over, like you say, with this the end of World War II and trying to stop Hitler? Wasn't it not something to do with starting up again?
Well, after, you know, the 45 era, Admiral Byrd went down to Antarctica,
Yeah,
and he flew into a hole there and saw civilization underneath the ice.
that's right. Yeah,
And so he talked the U.S. into mounting expeditionary force to go down there.
yeah.
A couple aircraft carriers, a couple
Icebreakers.
number of destroyers,
Yeah,
tenders, all kinds of stuff like
that's
that.
right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
So they went down there and they ran into UFOs coming up out of the water. And they had their asses handed to them, and they barely made it back to port in Brazil. No, Brazil? I think it's Brazil. Big Christ statue type thing. And they really took a licking back though. And then after that, you had the Falcons thing.
yeah.
But
But the thing is, what I can't
everything I've read
understand,
says the
if
Falcons.
the Americans had give refuge, right, yeah, to all those Nazi war criminals that never stood for any of those war crimes,
Yeah,
and all the scientists and what have you,
yeah,
and they became part of the government, as in NASA, because it's a military government
yeah.
organization,
Military-industrial complex. They got
and
in.
so they give them refuge. They've lived in the country. They married American people.
Yep.
Why would they get what, sort of like, how comes if the Germans were down in Antarctica, why would they be fighting the Americans? Because they were more or less allies, if you think about it.
They weren't allies at that time.
Well, it must have been, because
It
what
was
year was
after
that?
that.
When Admiral Byrd, what year was it?
That was in the 40s.
It was after the war. It was
Yeah,
47, wasn't it?
yeah, I think so.
So the thing is,
47 or 49, somewhere in that time frame.
yeah, so
I'd
they must have
I'd
been
have to
allies,
actually
because
I'd have to actually look up the dates for Project Hijack to see what it was.
Paperclip were before, and they were allies before, so it must have been after. So they were allies. They were still allies in a strange way, because there were Germans living in America working for NASA and the government, but yet
Well,
there were
the Germans didn't take control until the end of Eisenhower's term as president.
Say again, sorry, Joe.
The Germans didn't take control. The military-industrial complex did not take control until Eisenhower signed the bill saying that there's a military-industrial complex.
Yeah, but they were still working in that. They were still
They
working
were
in that
still working,
industry.
and they were doing
So the
spy
signature
operations, and they
doesn't
were
really
doing all
mean
kinds.
anything, because they were still working.
Yeah,
If you know what I mean.
they're working for NASA, and they're working for the CIA.
So what part? So who's there today then? In, let's say, in the, what do you
It's
call
hard
it?
to say. It's hard to say.
In Antarctica.
Oh,
So who's working in Antarctica then?
the U.S. has a base there,
Well, most countries have bases
and
there.
most
But
countries
the
have
thing
bases
is,
there. But
but
they
the thing
limit the
is,
bases to certain areas where they can go and where they can't go.
Yeah, but who
And
runs it? Who actually runs? I don't mean on top. I mean, the thing is,
underneath,
if the Americans got the butts kicked, right? Yeah, who did they get the butts kicked by originally? Before there were anybody, like on.
the supposedly the Nazis.
But why would the Nazis do that? Because aren't they in a way related to the
Well,
Americans?
I shouldn't call them Nazis. I should call them the SS.
But a lot of the especially from Peenemünde, a lot of these
Yeah,
people would have been SS stroke special, like
yeah, but they're still being monitored fairly heavy back in the early 50s.
well,
And
of
it was
course, yeah. But the thing is, they're still working. You still give them jobs,
they're
and
still given
bloody
jobs,
hell.
and
Let's
there's
put it this way: they've it's like giving kids a key to sweetie jar in it in a way. If you think about it,
yeah, I know.
you've got
It
weapons of
doesn't
mass
make sense to
destruction,
me. It
rockets
doesn't
that
make
can
sense to me
fly
either.
thousands of miles away,
Yeah,
and
it
all
doesn't
you
make
know what I mean. And it's like, remember them during the Second World War? Oh, you know what I mean? What happens if they turn around and aim those rockets and people that they had a grudge with? And I'm sure they had a grudge with England. Believe
yeah,
me, everybody else seems to have.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's ludicrous. It's like you've let these Nazis who sort of like don't like us and wanted to.
I'm not saying it was a smart move.
Well, I'm not.
It
Well, the
wasn't
thing
a
is,
smart move.
at the end of the day, who's down there running stuff under
Yeah.
the ice?
Well, there's still something going on under the ice. We got a report from a guy who was a pilot down there, and they had an emergency run to do, and so they plotted through an area that they weren't supposed to fly over,
Yeah.
and they saw a UFO come up from under the ice
Yeah, but apparently it's a usual
through a big
encounter.
hole. And Google Maps for a while was showing the big hole, and people were talking, "Oh, there's a big hole there." And we see these things coming in and out of it on Google Maps.
Yeah.
And then Google Maps blacked out the site. It's like,
I know an engineer that's worked there,
uh-huh,
and he was on the show about a year ago.
uh-huh.
Plumbing and electrician and what have you, and he was telling us what he'd seen there,
Oh, I'm sure you've seen a lot.
and he said he wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, I've got my theories about these things, and
Yeah.
But having said that, it's just a theory. But I haven't been there. But
Well, I haven't been there, and I don't plan on going there.
no, I don't think it's too
I'm
cold
too
for
old
me.
for much of anything anymore.
I think I'm the same at the moment. But yeah. So the thing is, that, like, just what is there? Just like who's about, and sort of like, what's the state of play now? Sort of like, do the people that used to belong to the German political party, do they want to sort of like start again and start up? You know what I mean? It sort of like makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does.
And is this who you were talking about? Are these the ones, these Nazis that are wanting to take over? Are they the ones that are?
I think they are. It was kind of interesting when they were asked and put in the Monday how they learned about rocketry and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what they said? They learned it from the U.S.
Them up
patent
there.
file.
From what? Sorry?
U.S. patent files. Robert
Yeah.
Goddard was a U.S. scientist,
Right.
and he had been experimenting with rockets, and it
Right.
was his patents that they based the Punamande work off of.
I thought they'd originally got their work from the Russians.
The
Originally, a lot of
in 1906, I think it was 1906, maybe
from solid
1908.
fuel to liquid fuel. They said that.
In 1906 or 1908, the first jet engine was demonstrated in one of the Serbian or the Croatian
Croatia, yeah, that's right, yeah.
countries, and they had seen that patent, and that's how they came up with the idea for a jet engine.
Yeah. Well,
So
apparently,
what they had done before the war is they sent out people to all the patent repositories around the world
yeah,
to look for things that they could use for war.
yeah. I mean, the problem is though, but when they were looking and making these rockets and saying we're going to have to, with this race against the Russians, and they
Yeah,
were saying we're using what you called the hard fuel rather
yeah,
than liquid fuel.
yeah.
They got the idea of liquid fuel from the Russians,
Yeah, I was
even though the
surprised. I
Russians
was
didn't get there. Like before the Americans,
well,
that they
God,
realized that they could get their rockets
yeah,
down by
Goddard was
89.
using liquid fuel,
Hmm,
and he did some of the first research on it.
yeah.
And
But there'd been a few. There'd been a few. I'd read on this, and I'd watched a documentary on it, and it was saying that sort of like there were a few countries, but the Germans really were backwards compared to the Russians because they knew
yeah,
the liquid fuel was the way to go.
yeah,
But you see, the thing is, it's like a lot of their designs for like a lot of their aircraft and what have you. A
yeah.
lot of them were still using like wood and framework
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
and cloth
yeah,
and glue. And they said that if they would have had the petroleum glue as opposed to the fish glue, what they had, if they'd
yeah,
have had the petroleum glue, some of these things would have been able to fly off of a sixpence, fly around a sixpence.
yeah.
But it was the glue that were letting them down. And then
Oh yeah,
obviously going on to manufacturing and using aluminium and stuff,
yeah.
later on, wow, like a different
Well,
story altogether.
like you know, a a family friend, George Fleming, was a junior engineer on the Avro Air Car. Have you heard of the Avro Air
Avril,
Car?
yeah, of course, yeah.
And the videos they only show it hovering like 6 inches off the ground, and
Yeah.
it does this waffling action type of thing.
Mm.
And before they closed down the project, it crashed from 30,000 feet.
Wow.
There was a pilot and an engineer on board, and it started the waffling action,
Yeah.
which is something called hysteresis of the hydraulic system.
Right.
Whereas if they had an electrical system, they wouldn't have had that problem.
No.
This
Wow.
is the same problem with the flying wing
Yeah.
design.
Right.
And so when they built the flying wing in the US, the first time they built it with hydraulics. And it had a stability problem, so you couldn't
Yeah.
always level it out and stuff. And then when they rebuilt it, they built it with electrical controls on it instead of hydraulics. And so now we have a flying wing
It works
that works.
very well.
And like George said, if they would have continued on and gone to electrical instead of the hydraulic system,
Mm.
that would have flown. I mean, it
Yeah.
flew up to 30,000 feet. The pilot ejected, and the engineer ended up riding it all the way into the ground without a pilot. And it buried itself in a swamp in Canada. And they completely dug out the whole swamp area to get every bit they could of the vehicle that crashed.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, I was, and George was one. George had worked as an aeronautical engineer for Air Canada, and he made sure the planes were all airworthy, and he did that out of Winnipeg. And he grounded their whole fleet of 747s because he found a pressure leak, and he knew that that would cause problems.
Yeah.
And it was about 2 weeks into the grounding, and Air Canada was ready to fire him because he was keeping the planes grounded. And then one of the 747s had its top blow off from a pressure leak over on its way out to Hawaii. And so then they said, okay, you did a good job for us. You kept us from that kind of problem. But George was a really neat guy. There were a lot of things he couldn't tell me about that he was still classified, but he told me about the arrow probably about a month before he died.
Wow. So going back now then, going back,
Okay.
because we've been on an hour and a half now, so we know that every 10 years,
20 years.
every 20 years.
Yeah. So what's going to happen in 2023?
So let's just I mean, from my point of view, like I said earlier, sort of like who's running things? Who's running things now? Sort of like, because in my country, you don't know who's running things. I think it's more or less it's running. It's running
Who's
away.
running the burger builders?
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, we've seen these people. We've seen documentaries with them and what have you. It's like anything else. So if you annoy enough people in the world, no matter how much money you've got, when you've got millions of people that are on the breadline and that are, like almost being put into concentration camps, being told not to go out, being given these drugs and what have you, sort of like, and the amount of people that have died, wow, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah.
Once you start doing this and people start waking up and saying, right, look, you're accountable. And they're bringing these people now, and they are accountable. And you can see that what they've told people are lies, like we always said there were. Right, yeah. These
Yeah.
people then need to be put in prison. That is the next step. All these people need to be put in prison. Until that happens, then we can't move any forward. We can't move forward, can we?
Basically.
We need all
I
these
mean,
people
we can
in
move
government.
forward. There's an underground current, shall we say, among the general population,
Yeah,
where things are developed that the controllers don't really want developed. One of the things that happened was like the first microcomputers when they came out.
yeah,
Oh God, did the people in power ever reject that?
yeah,
But then they got control of the different companies and stuff, and then it was okay.
And now, of course, we're being told in the next 10 years, you won't need to write a letter to anybody, because you'll be able to do it from your mind to somebody's computer.
Really?
So
Okay.
you'll be able to send an email from your mind, right? Yeah, to somebody else's equivalent to their computer.
Yeah.
Now, their computer might be here. So does that mean we'll be communicating to each other once we've got, say, for instance, you might get one of those friends requests.
Yeah.
You might have a friends request uploaded. Hi there, Joe. It's Russ here. Just do you want to be on my sort of like friends list? This telepathic friends list.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Currently, what they're working with is they're working with an implant, an
Well, this
electronic
is what I'm
implant.
talking about. This is how
Yeah.
they'd be. This is in a way what they'd be using. And I mean, like I had somebody say to me, "Oh, it's nonsense. This all this nonsense. What you're talking about with these chips and what have you?" And
Well,
and I said, "Well,
Elon
no, it's
Musk
not."
is going for it.
Say again, sorry.
Elon Musk is going for it.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, look at we've already seen it working, because in Sweden they've put a chip in people's hands so that they get their money, their currency
Yeah.
from work, and from their, if they're on entitlements from the government,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it'll be paid through their chip. And I
I,
told somebody that, and they said, "Oh, it's rubbish." I said, "It's not. Have a look and see." I
uh,
think it was in world news about this.
we looked at that back in the 70s. We were looking at that.
Yeah,
Or
we got,
one
but
of my
but
professors had written a
Sweden's
book.
done it.
One of my professors had written a book on it,
Yeah,
and they were talking about that, doing it in the arm or the hand or whatever.
yeah.
And they're also talking about one in the forehead, but
The
that
mark of
didn't
the
seem to make
beast.
as much sense. And at that time, they started chipping cattle,
Yeah,
and they started chipping, you know, herds of different animals, and we started chipping pets like cats and dogs to get
that's
them
right.
back to their owners and stuff if they were
That's
lost.
right. Yeah,
And it's a chip that is under the skin. It's in a sealed capsule, and what it does is you run a field, runs through the electrical field, and that gives it the charge to respond that says, "Hey, this is who I am,"
yeah.
and then it shuts down. So it's not as advanced as what Elon Musk is looking at right now, but
No,
it's more of a passive system, and it's just like what they're doing with what they call RFID on cars, and that's the same
yeah,
thing for clothing. You have these little tags that they clip onto the clothing, and that'll let them know that you're trying to take something out of the store that you shouldn't
that's
take
right.
out of
Yeah,
the store.
yeah.
So it's the same type of technology, and they've been using it forever.
This is it. But like
Well,
I said, this
at
is,
least since the 70s.
yeah. Well, this is, like I said, this in Sweden. It's linked to your bank card and all that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, and I suppose you can upgrade it. I don't know if they have to take it out to upgrade it, or
Yeah,
just put it
and just
next.
imagine how much people do to hack that now. It's not an unhackable system. Anything that people come up with could be hacked.
Well, of course, yeah. But the point is, like they've got to try it out, haven't they? computers are, but we're using them daily, and we just get on with it, don't we?
Yeah,
So
and that's probably the way it's going to go. Is people just get on with it.
yeah, well, this is
You
what they're
know,
saying.
the average person out there is just trying to survive day to day
Oh yeah,
and
you
try
just hit
try
the
and
nail
go
on
the
the head there.
path of least resistance.
Yeah,
And when you try and resist, then the system fights back.
you can say that again. You can. You can say that again.
Yeah,
But we'll just have
and they've got all these different systems and stuff. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was different. I mean, there are practically no tabs on anything,
no.
and it was really a different time.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Same here. Sort of like nothing is nothing's as easy as it used to be. Everything's hard work. People are hard work.
Oh yeah.
So like people are not the same. I don't think people are the same anymore.
People are still people, but
Yeah, but the change is
their
like everything
motives
else.
and their drives and their social ability and that type of stuff has changed.
Yeah, I've seen a big change. From 20 to now, I see a big change in people.
Yeah,
Massive change. In
yeah,
fact, I don't see as many people. I do not see as many people as I used to. That's
yeah.
a fact. Because one thing, people don't drive around as much because of the petrol and the oil.
Now you
Uh,
talk about petrol and oil. We're planning a trip here for the month of July. We're
yeah,
driving from Minneapolis to British Columbia,
right,
and we'll spend a month out there seeing our daughter, and then drive back.
right. Well, people around here, we live in. It's called a seaside resort. Yeah, where
Uh-huh.
people come on holidays and stuff.
Yeah,
Where the seaside is, and like
yeah,
have sand castles and eat
yeah.
fish and chips and chew rock. This sweet rock and what have you. And the problem is that the people are not driving hundreds of miles anymore because they can't afford to. So you're not seeing the
Well,
people.
I don't know what you're paying for petrol there. Right now, we're about 3.25 a gallon here,
Yeah, it's probably double. It always
and
has been. It always
when I
has been. When it used to be 60 pence, when it used to be 60 cents,
yeah,
in America, we'd be
yeah,
paying something like £1, $1.50. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And when the French and the Europeans were paying 60 pence, we'd be paying, sort of like $1 or £1,
yeah,
even though that they were getting the petrol from us, from England. How does
yeah.
that work? How
Well,
does that work?
in Canada, I know for my trip, I've got a plan on close to $8 a gallon in Canada,
Yeah, it will be. Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're a supplier of it. So
How does
you
it
know,
work? This is a big question.
we in the U.S. have so many of our wells capped that it's not effective to draw fuel out of them.
No, no.
And
Cheaper to buy from other people.
yeah, a friend of mine used to work at a refinery here in the Twin Cities area, and he this was back when gas prices here first hit $3 a gallon, a number like a decade or so ago. And he said, they talk about a barrel of oil being uh, $90 a barrel.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, that one barrel of oil, they refine out at the refinery and they mix it with natural gas. And they get, what was it he said? It's like, maybe a normal barrel of oil will generate 30 gallons of gas or whatever.
Yeah.
And by mixing it with natural gas in the processing that they do,
Yeah.
they then get close to 200 gallons out of it.
Yeah.
So,
Your refineries are everything. Your
it's a scam.
refineries are the ones that make the money.
It's a scam.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
And, they talk about electric cars now. And we got electric cars that can only go 250 miles because they're trying to shrink how far we can travel.
Yeah.
In the US, it's not, if you've got a gas car, yeah, it's going to take you a few days.
Yeah.
For us on our drive, going out, it'll be 4 days out and it'll be 3 days back, or 4 nights out and 3 nights back.
Yeah.
And we could go out in less time, but we have to make another stop on the way.
Yeah.
But it's just that the thing is, back in the 50s, they had something called the fish carburetor.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was developed in the 40s, but they had it in the 50s. And the fish carburetor would allow a car to get 150 to 200 miles to the gallon.
Mm-hmm.
And the fish carburetor didn't care whether you were burning kerosene, gasoline, perfume, or 120 proof alcohol.
Yeah.
Either one it would run on. And I, back in the 70s, I looked into all that type of stuff because I was looking into alternative energy and whatever. And actually, I was looking for an efficient way to fly a UFO, to be honest with you. Yeah. And so I was looking for an energy source that would work for that. And, they've had 200 mile per gallon carburetors. Where are they? They've locked up and they buried the patents.
Yeah. For a long time.
A fellow by the name of Purrich was a teacher at Texas A&M. And as a project, he created a converter that would convert water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they took a Winnebago with a big V8 engine in it. They disabled 3 of the cylinders so that it could only use 5 of the cylinders.
Yeah.
And because otherwise it would torque the crankshaft out of the engine.
Wow.
And so they ran that around the perimeter of the United States, giving lectures at different colleges around the way. And on this pen pal I had, Tom Pauls, who wrote How to Build Your Own Flying Saucer and Other Endeavors in Theoretical Engineering, was in Denver at a conference at the time that they came in with that Winnebago.
Yeah.
And he said one of the stories they told was that they had to, in the Rocky Mountains there, the tank of water froze in the Winnebago. And so they had to put snow up under their armpits to melt it so that they'd have water to put into the engine to get it started to heat everything up again.
Wow.
And anyway, when Purich got back to to Texas and got home and stuff, he refused to sell the patent to the oil companies.
Yeah.
And he committed suicide. He shot himself in the back of the head.
I remember reading that. Yeah.
In the back of the head 3 times.
Didn't make
And
any sense.
Then to make sure he did a good job, he firebombed his house afterwards.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, yeah, that's a put up story.
Unbelievable. I remember reading that. Yeah, I remember reading that. Unbelievable.
You know, the people that are rich want to stay rich.
Oh, of course.
And they'll do damn near anything they can to do that.
Yeah, I can understand that, Joe. I can understand that. I'll never be rich, but never mind. Well, listen, Joe,
I used to say,
I'm going to get off now because
overtime?
I'm feeling rather under the weather.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What's wrong?
It's just me ME playing up. I've had a bad week and what have you.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Just
go take me medication. So I'm going to say we'll have to have another chat. Come on again, and we'll talk about.
Probably not until after August, because I'm going to be busy with other things until then.
No problem. Well, I've got a few shows booked and what have you anyway. So
okay,
and
we'll keep in touch.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, I'm around. I'm on here.
Yeah.
So I'll say, Joe Swanson, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and thanks for anybody who's been watching and listening.
Or anyone who watches after the show.
Yeah, probably.